want to walk you through the Alpine stitch. It's a really fun and simple stitch repeat and has a lot of texture. Today I'll be making a dishcloth just to do some practice, and feel free to follow along, or I do have a blanket pattern using this if you want to jump into a blanket. Today I'll be using the Dishy yarn from We Crochet, the size 5mm H hook, and then I'll also have a yarn needle to weave in the ends, and of course scissors to fasten off. So let's go ahead and get started with this fun textured stitch. Now for the sample today, I'm just simply going to chain an even amount. For this one I have done 40 stitches, but you can do any even amount of stitches for this stitch pattern repeat. For the first row, you could start with a foundation single crochet row, or you can chain 40, and starting in the very first chain from the hook, we'll start by single crocheting into each stitch across. So our first row is simply 40 single crochet stitches, but once again, you can make this any size that you would like. Now that we have our first row of single crochet stitches, we are going to turn, and for row 2, we're going to start with a stacked single crochet, and then the rest of the stitches will be done in double crochet. But let me show you how to do a stacked single crochet. I love using this on the edges. It just makes a nice, cleaner, straight edge. So we'll start by entering the very first stitch. I haven't done any starting chains. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. Yes, we just made a single crochet stitch, but we're not done. We're going to go right back into this horizontal bar we see right here, and we're going to insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through again. So now that's why we've done stacked single crochets. It's a great height to do either half double crochet row or a double crochet row like we're going to do now. So for row 2, we'll simply double crochet into each row across. So for row 2, we are simply going to double crochet into each stitch across. Now after double crocheting into each stitch across, we are going to turn our work, and we are going to single crochet in each stitch across. Now whether you chain 1 at the beginning of the row or not is completely up to you. I've experimented with this, and I'll be honest, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes that chain stitch adds extra bulk, so if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can simply start by single crocheting into the very first stitch without chaining 1. But we will single crochet into each stitch across for row 3. I know nothing exciting is happening with this Alpine stitch yet. You're not seeing that texture that you want to see, but I promise when you come back for the next row, you'll see that beautiful stitch start to take shape. All right, so here we go with row 4. So row 4, 5, 6, and 7 will be our repeat rows. 1 through 3 are really just setting us up to get started. So here is what we are going to do. For the very first stitch in row 4, we're going to start with a stacked single crochet. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be working a post stitch around the previous double crochet row. So we're not working the single crochet row, but we're going to go to the next double crochet stitch that's down a couple of rows, and we're going to be working around this as a post stitch. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to create a double crochet where we're going to go around this, inserting to the right, going underneath and back to the front, and then we'll yarn over, pull up a loop, and here's the most critical part about the Alpine stitch. We want to pull these loops all the way back up to the height of our current row. That's what's going to give it that really nice look. We want to make sure that we are pulling this all the way up, and if we don't, it will cause our fabric to curl. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2, and that completes the first Alpine style stitch. Now we're going to do a double crochet into the next stitch. Remember, when you are working around post stitches, there will be a stitch that seems to be unworked on the back. You don't want to work the stitch right here because we've already worked that down here as a post stitch. So we're going to double crochet into the next stitch, leaving the stitch behind that post stitch unworked. Now here's our repeat until we get towards the end of this row. We are going to be doing an Alpine stitch, which is doing the front post double crochet around the double crochet stitch from the rows below, only making sure that we pull it up to the right height. So here we go again. We're going to work this as a post stitch, and we're going to pull it all the way up until you feel like you've pretty much gotten to the height of your current row. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and then we will double crochet into the next stitch. See how it creates that really nice texture? Now we're going to keep doing that all the way across. We're going to be doing those nice textured stitches, those post stitches, and then a double crochet stitch. So front post double crochet, and then a double crochet stitch. Front post double crochet, pulling up those loops, and double crochet. Keep working that all the way across. Now, as we get to the end of the row here, you're going to see that we have some stitches that we don't really want to work our very edge stitches, and it's totally fine, because what we'll simply do is I've done a double crochet stitch, I've done my repeat across, and in the very last, if there's one left over, we're simply going to double crochet. And now we're going to turn our work, and for row 5, we are simply going to single crochet into each stitch across, and then come on back for row 6. Now here we are for row 6. We're going to start our row by doing a stacked single crochet. And now we're going to do opposite of what we did before. So this very next stitch is right above the Alpine style front post double crochet stitch. What we want to do is we want to do a double crochet into our next stitch, because we're going to be doing the opposite of what we did down below. So now here we are. We're going to want to work this next stitch as a post stitch that's in between these two. So this will be the next stitch we want to work around. So I'm going to yarn over, and we're going to do a front post double crochet, pulling up those loops, and then we'll double crochet into the very next stitch. See how nice that is? This is what it takes to do the stitch. It's really not much at all, but it keeps that we're alternating that texture every single time we do these front post stitches rows, and it creates a gorgeous, gorgeous texture. And like I said, if your fabric is really curling down, let's say it's like really curling downward, it means that you're not pulling your loops up high enough. You want to make sure that whenever you're pulling up those loops, you're pulling them up to a really nice height. I know it feels like you're pulling them up too much. I promise you're not. You want to pull them up to a nice height so that it has that beautiful, gorgeous texture. So complete this all the way across until you get towards the end of this row for row 6. Now, as we get to the end of row 6, we notice that we have a stitch here that we can work our Alpine stitch style front post around, and then we'll simply end the row with a double crochet, a regular double crochet stitch. So it works out that way, that we're just kind of putting our extra stitches on certain ends and alternating between. For row 7, we will simply turn and single crochet into each stitch across. So this is what the Alpine stitch looks like after getting through one repeat. So this is row 1 through 7, but we will be doing rows 4 through 7 again and again to make this the height that we wanted. So it's a really simple repeat. Just remember, as you get started, you're always going to be working the front post stitches between those ones you see from the row below. So it's really simple to work this across without having to look at the instructions after you get going on a few rows. I'm going to work this up a little bit more and show you what it looks like as a bigger sample. Now I'm going to show you how to put a border, a ribbing border, along the edges of this particular washcloth. So to do a ribbing border, and this can go for any flat piece, we're going to start by chaining 5. And this right here will determine the thickness of your border that you'll want. So what I like to do is I like to single crochet into the very first chain from the hook. If you want a turning chain, you can chain one more. And like I said, you can chain more or less for a thicker or thinner border. And then I'm simply going to single crochet into each of the chain stitches across. And once I've gotten down to here, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch into the next 2 stitches and then turn. And now I'm going to skip those 2 slip stitches and working in the back loop only. So when you look at the top of a stitch, it looks like a V and there's a front loop and a back loop. Working in the back loop only, we're going to single crochet into each stitch across until the very last stitch. So once we get to this last stitch, on the edge stitches, I like to single crochet through both of the loops. It makes the edges a bit more nice and clean. Then we're going to go ahead and turn our work again. And this is where if you want to chain 1, you can. If you don't want to chain 1, you don't have to. But if you do, I like to tighten those down really tight. And then working through both loops of the first stitch, I'm going to single crochet. And then the remaining stitches we will work in that back loop only. That's what creates that ribbing look. And now that I've single crocheted down this row, we're going to slip stitch the next 2 stitches from the edge of our washcloth or blanket and then turn our work. And we're just repeating the previous 2 rows. So we're going to skip the 2 slip stitches we just did, and in the back loop only, single crochet into each stitch across until the very edge stitch. And then in this last stitch, I like to single crochet through both stitches. Then I will turn my work, chain 1 if you want, tighten that chain down, working through both loops, single crochet, and then working through the back loops, we will single crochet in the remaining stitches across, and then we will slip stitch 2 stitches from the edge of our work and continue working those 2 rows all the way across here. So this is what I'm going to do for this washcloth. I'm going to work this ribbing all the way across to this edge. Then I'm going to fasten off and do the same down here. And then I'm going to do it along the sides. And when I do along the sides, I'll also be working along the edge of the previous ribbing. So let me show you what that looks like. I'll finish this row. I'm going to do the exact same thing down here, and I'll come back to work on each of the sides. So now that we have worked the ribbing along the top and the bottom of this washcloth, we're going to go ahead and work it along these sides. Now to do so, we're going to join at one of the corners with the right side facing, and then we're going to be chaining the same amount that we did on these sides because we want to make the same amount of ribbing. So I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to start by single crocheting into the very first chain from the hook and in the remaining across. Now these first stitches will seem pretty easy because we have single crochet style stitches along here to work into. So we're just slip stitching 1 stitch per stitch along this side. But when we get to this section, these are the height of a double crochet. So we're going to work those a little bit different. Now I'm going to do this first section here where we're just slip stitching 1 stitch per stitch along this side. But as we get into this area, this is no longer single crochet stitches in height. So we've got some double crochet stitches height, some single crochet stitches. So I'm going to show you how to work this edge when I get there. So whenever we're slip stitching across the edge of a piece, we want to make sure we're spacing our slip stitches on the edge the same distance we would as if it were a single crochet stitch. So since we have some double crochet stitches in here and single crochet rows, we'll do 2 stitches per double crochet row. So you would slip stitch 2 along the edge and 1 stitch per single crochet row. So the important thing on this to remember is simply to keep the spacing as if it were a single crochet style spacing. So I've just slip stitched 2, but that's because it's 1 double crochet row. And then I'll turn my work, skip those 2 stitches and slip stitch in the back loop only until the last stitch, and then I will single crochet in the last. But that's all we do. We keep repeating these same instructions that we did on the top and the bottom of this. But when we get to the edge, we just want to make sure we keep just as even of a spacing as we did with the top and the bottom where we were working 1 slip stitch per stitch. So on the edges we'll be working 1 slip stitch per single crochet row and 2 slip stitches per double crochet stitch row, because that is almost the height of 2 single crochet stitches. So once again, I'm going to just insert here and then insert here as if I was doing like the spacing of a single crochet stitch. And that's all I will do all the way across on this edge. And notice we are working, once again, we are working across the previous ribbing to make it a nice corner. So I'll work this ribbing all the way across here, and then I'll repeat that down here on this other side, and it will create a nice edge. This is a great edge for blankets. There's an Alpine stitch blanket coming. I really enjoy using the stitch. It's a nice texture stitch for that. I hope you've really enjoyed this tutorial. Come back soon for some more projects and be sure to hit that subscribe button.